Welcome back, everybody. Today we seem to have gotten somebody's attention. We've got a couple of items that were sent in to us by Harbor Frieght, and that is this Ames DM1000 and a Warrior compact cordless screwdriver set, which this is actually a bit of a surprise. I didn't know they were going to send this over. So these two items were sent in. I knew I was going to get the multimeter. I'm very excited to get a look at this. This is at the HVAC and electrical level in their lineup. And a little bit of back and forth. There's a very similar one, the DM1010. But we'll get to that in a second as to what's different there. Let's start with the simple one. So they sent us this Warrior compact cordless screwdriver set. So quick chain chuck, hours of runtime, compact and lightweight, precision fastening, 100 RPM, forward and reverse. So we get a pretty standard plastic blow mold case. And then we have the item itself, which, if I can get it open, looks like it's got a couple of little security tabs here that will just pop off. And with those out of the way, it opens up. So we've got, says it's a 19-in-1 electric screwdriver. 90-day warranty, pretty typical of Harbor Frieght. Looks like it uses 2 AAA batteries. I like this. I'll see if I can get a bigger version out of a PDF to show you guys. There's a exploded view diagram of how this thing goes together and all the bits and pieces. So if you did want to take it apart for some reason, here's how, and here's what's going on inside of it. So let's open this up. So the button on the back, forward, reverse, kind of mushy. Wish those were a little stiffer. It's probably for the LED. And then this twist that unlocks and then pops off. Typical remove before use tab. And then the batteries that are in here are, this is good. So these are Harbor Freight's Thunderbolt Magnum. These are their alkaline AAA batteries. Pretty standard alkaline battery, usually available at a decent rate. Good to see that included in their tool as opposed to a zinc chloride, which they do sell. Okay, I like that. So unlike a lot of tools, including, I have a lithium driver, and we'll get that out for the full review when we do that. But unlike a lot of those, the flashlight itself just has an on-off button on the back of the tool. And then, yeah, these are a little stiffer and stickier than I would like. They're certainly not the worst buttons, but they're not my favorites either. Functional, and I think this tool is relatively inexpensive, so I can't complain too much. Let's see, according to this is 56757, $11.99. Well, I feel like they could have done a little bit better on these buttons for $11.99. I might go see if this is just my unit or whatnot in the store at some point in the next couple of days. Let's get a look at the included screwdrivers. So these are CRV. We've got 1, 2, 3 sizes of 5-point star. These are always so difficult to take out. You need a prying tool just to get the screwdriver. driver bits out. All right, so there is a tri-lobe, which it's funny, the last unboxing we did, I needed a tri-lobe. This little U shape, which I've never used. So I've used plenty of these, you know, odd bits. I've used the 3-point Phillips-like bit. I've used the stars. I've used the trilobes. I have never used one of these U-type 2-point bits in anything. So that is interesting. Also, yeah, that's... Alright, so what do we got for the rest of it? We've got, looks like a couple of squares. I take that back. It looks like we have a square, probably a number 0. CRV S0. Yep, number 0 square. Definitely appreciate seeing that. We've got 2 different sizes of hex. Let's see, that's 3.0. Does it say? So I don't have to take each one of these out to read it. Oh, there we go. So square 0, triangle 3, pentagram 8, 1.25. Hexes are 2.5 and 3 millimeter. Phillips 000, 0, and 2. I don't understand why they do this. I've actually had to... I've had other screwdriver sets from Harbor Frieght before and had to kind of mix and match my bits. Is that they'll give you a number 2 Phillips, and then they'll give you a number 0 Phillips, but they won't give you a number 1. So if I was to repackage this set, I would probably... I'd probably take out the 2 millimeter flat and just keep the 1 and the 3. I'd add a number 1 Phillips. I'd lose the U shape. I'd give myself an extra star or hex. The stars are T5, T6, T8, so that's your Torx. Hex is 2.53. So I give myself a little bit more variety there, and take a, you know, make some adjustments there. All right, so there's that. We'll have a full review of this at some point in the future. Overall, it's that forward button getting stuck that really bothers me. You know what? Let's try one other thing. Yeah, that's nice and secure in there. So that's good. Oh. So overall, first impression, blow mold case, a little fidgetier than I'd like it to be. Kind of hard to pry the tools out. I like the dedicated flashlight button. Not a huge fan of the forward, but only the forward getting stuck. Warrior's definitely some of their cheaper tools there, so there may be a higher end version of this that I'll take a peek at and see when we get to the full review. But this is actually the star of the show here. This is the Ames DM1000. So Ames is their new multimeter line. These are replacing some of the old Centec meters, which is my existing day-to-day meter. And this one, just on the baseline, compares fairly well with their other top-end meter, and that is the DM1010, which this is residential commercial contractors, HVAC technicians. The DM1010 is supposed to be for commercial contractors, HVAC technicians, and advanced troubleshooting. This is a 6600 count meter. That's a 6000 count meter. Where the big differences between them show up. Most of them are fairly small. You know, voltage range on this is 1,000 volts. That's 750. 1,000, it's got one more range. Resistance 66 mega ohms versus 60. Capacitance on this is only 66 MF versus 4,000 microfarads. You know, 10 kilohertz frequency versus 10 megahertz frequency. They're fairly similar meters, but there's two features on this one that stand out compared to the DM1010, and that is non-contact voltage and LOZ. Anyway, so depending on what you do day to day is really going to tell you which one of the two to look at. And this is fairly typical of some of these meters, is that you can take the same base meter and make some slight tweaks to it to get two different tools. And we see that a lot with certain companies. So that's excellent. Nice carrying pouch. Here's the meter itself. Intertech rated, used in 9. I feel like some of this is a step backwards. Used in a 9-volt battery. Does it include the 9-volt battery? Okay, here. Now, I just gave them all sorts of credit for including alkaline batteries in the Warrior, and here is a zinc chloride Thunderbolt Magnum included with the meter. Kind of bummed to see that. So this is a AMES 3204 multifunction socket, and man, that looks familiar. Give me 1 second here. So lo and behold, on my shelf, I have an AMES 3204 multifunction socket, which, if there was any question left, this is my Mastech MS8040. Harbor Frieght has used Mastech as the ODM for their meters before. And that is not a bad thing. Mastech is fairly popular as a multimeter ODM. And if I wasn't sure who was making the Ames meters, or at least supplying componentry for the Ames meters before, well, this tells me right off the bat, I'm probably going to see the word Mastech somewhere inside that meter. Like I said, that's not bad at all, but it certainly drives home the point. We're not going to do a full teardown on the DM1000 today, but we are going to go ahead and, you know what? We're going to go ahead and put the battery in it. We're going to put it side by side with the other Harbor Frieght meter, and one that they still sell, and one that I have always told people to grab, my Suntech 7-in-1. Alright, so that needed a little bit of help to get the battery compartment out. encouraging to see that this hasn't sat on a shelf for too long. The last multimeter, or I should say one of the last products that we got that included batteries like this, came with exploded batteries, and that was the general Tool Smart tools, which was also a Mastech ODM meter. Now, Harbor Frieght tells me that they have worked on the design for this meter specifically. So I fully anticipate seeing some custom componentry here and not being able to just turn around and, purchase the same meter off the shelf from someone else, which is always the downside to using a reference design. So that's not encouraging on the Warrior screwdriver, because I'm just trying to put this Phillips screw in my multimeter housing, which granted is a little stiff, but shouldn't be beyond it. All right, enough picking on that. So here's the DM1000, and I mentioned, they've used Mastech as an ODM before. This is the Centec P98674, which is probably not even the actual item number now. They tend to update those based on what factory or what line is being used to produce the item. So, but this was through and through an MS 82266 off the top of my head. I'll put it in text if I'm not sure. And this one, I mean, that was to the benefit of this meter. That made it very easy to find people who had opened up those Mastech models and offered support on modifying them and tweaking them and things of that nature. So, that's not bad. Everybody's got to go somewhere to build things. All right. So, right off the bat, we can see a couple of things. So, my old meter, there was some floating, millivoltage level capacitance. It goes away the second you start measuring anything. But you can see there's some calibration issues there. And another interesting part, and this is part of why I always liked this meter, you can see that my studio is 61 degrees, or at least the meter is at this point. It was outside the studio beforehand. And let's go ahead and turn it to temp. And I think, there we go. That actually matches the thermostat on my wall. So this may be a little more accurate out of the box, which is a good thing. One thing I'm not a fan of, you'll probably note, the lights on this one have come up, whereas there's no lights here. And what that does on the 8266, 8266, this Centec model, is it tells you where to plug your leads in, and it yells at you if you get it wrong. Whereas this, I don't think, is going to tell me anything. So I'm kind of bummed to see that function go away. That was one of the more useful, what's the word I want to use here? Safety net features on this meter was that, you know, if you plugged your leads into the wrong jacks, it would tell you that you were going to blow up the meter. So kind of bummed to see that go away, although definitely happy to, let's see, that defaulted to millivolts. Happy to see this reading less floating voltage out of the gate. I don't have anything here to measure with both meters to show the improvement in time. So what we're going to do is just check a couple of things. We're going to turn on the backlight on each meter, and it looks like the new meter has a substantially brighter backlight, which is an excellent function. We've got a min-max function on here, which is good to see. We've got all of our typical stuff on the dial. I see continuity, I see frequency and hertz. Let's see here. DC voltage accuracy at 660 millivolts, plus or minus 0.8%. 6.6 to 660, plus or minus 5,000 volts, plus or minus 0.8. DC current ranges 660 microamps, 6600 microamps, 66 milliamps, 660 milliamp, 10 amp. Current accuracy 660 plus or minus 1%. All of these look like fairly typical specs that I would expect out of a meter in this class. Continuity, meter beeps at 50 ohms. LCD display, operating temperature 32 to 104 Fahrenheit, which is interesting because it will, the thermocouple that it includes will actually read up to 1832 Fahrenheit, or 1000 Celsius as it were. But the meter will not operate anywhere near that hot. Granted, 104 Fahrenheit probably isn't good for the LCD. This one got left out in direct sunlight one day for about 15 minutes. And the LCD turned completely black. You know, it's been abused a few times. So that's part of why, you know, things like a little bit of floating voltage and some of the idiosyncrasies are just due to age. It probably needs cleaned. I'm sure there's some gunk in the contacts, some of which is likely conductive, and it probably does need recalibrated at this point. This meter is 15 years old, give or take. Anyway, that's besides the point. So all these specs, I'll put them up, look pretty straightforward. Input com, 600 milliamp jack, 10 amp jack. Pretty typical rotary switch. We're going to tear this thing apart and look at all of this stuff from the inside when we do the full review. Says there's a bar graph. I can see the bar graph on the screen. Let's look at the leads. The leads feel and look like they're basically the same leads. So that's neither good nor bad. What I will note is that I don't feel like I'm going to get a nosebleed looking at these. So let's go ahead and pop these in. I've got it set to hertz. And we're going to measure some AC voltage if there we go. I can get the training wheels off of the multimeter leads. And we'll unplug whatever this is. But let's not unplug our studio camera. All right, 60 hertz in the studio, 59.99. Impressive. I dig it. Quick check. Come on, there we go. And we'll plug this back in. I don't know what I unplugged. Not bad. These leads, they're pretty typical. They're not the most flexible leads that I've ever seen or encountered. You can definitely buy better ones, but these also aren't the cheap plastic gonna fight with you. If you look at them the wrong way, you need to run out and replace them because the leads that, you know, were the most expensive part of the meter type ones that you see as well. So that's not bad. This is, oh, that's nifty. So this is inside the pouch that came with the meter, and I don't think it tells me what they call it, but it's magnetic. So, oh, it shows a picture of that being used to just kind of hang the meter in an electrical panel. So the idea is that this would go here, like this. And then it would just be enough to hang the meter from something, which you can't see, but here, there we go. The strap on my wristwatch is magnetic. All right, that's nifty. I like that addition. I'd like it more if the back of the meter was magnetic and it would stick to it. And before we forget, let's go ahead and get this out of the way. All right, so that's just a quick what's interesting, what's exciting on the DM1000. Oh, you know what? Let's try. All right. So the non-contact voltage, turn it on. Does it matter what setting it's on? No, as long as the meter is on, you can just press that non-contact voltage button and hold it to something that should have voltage, and it'll beep if there's voltage there. Nifty. Anyway, as I was saying, that's just a quick walkthrough, unboxing the Warrior Compact cordless screwdriver set. Not super impressed with that. Gonna have a couple of things to say to their people there. The Ames DM1000, very excited to see it. Little disappointed at some of the exclusions. So some of the stuff, and you know what, I didn't even get through all these, that the old Syntec meter could do, I just don't see on the DM1000. And some of that makes sense. Like, yeah, the light sensor and the decibel meter were useful to me, but probably not super useful for everyone day to day. Non-contact voltage, probably more useful there. The lit jacks for the for your test leads, that's actually a bigger bummer for me, because it was a good safety net. It was also super useful to have that, like, if I'm in a ceiling and can't quite see the meter, the jacks will light up and I should be able to plug things in like that. Really impressed with this. I know it's not really that huge a deal for most people, but really impressed to see that they've included this carrying case. There's room if you wanted to put some alligator clips and whatnot in there. Good little case. Feels like the material is going to hold up fairly well. Probably fit both meters in there if I tried. So, good to see that they're establishing Ames as a brand. Centec kind of did everything as far as measurements were concerned at Harbor Frieght. So, this same Centec top-of-the-line meter was in the same range as the free, the battery's worth more than the rest of the meter style meters they would give away some weeks. So, definitely some brand evolution there that's interesting to see. I do want to thank Harbor Frieght for sending these in. Even if I'm not super impressed with the Warrior screwdriver, maybe I'll have a better time with it working on actual electronics, which is definitely where this is targeted. I just feel like it doesn't have as much torque as it should for what it is. Although, $11, it's not the most expensive thing either. The Ames meter here, like I said, overall fairly impressed with it. Definitely glad to see some of the improvements with it. At about $70, it lives in the same price bracket that this used to live in, and overall is interesting to see. A little bummed to see, like I said, some of the losses, the lit jacks. Probably not the most, what's the word I want to use here, useful features for everyone, and someone buying a meter this expensive should know where to plug things in. That doesn't mean we don't make mistakes, though. Honestly, out of all the features that went away, that's probably going to be my biggest complaint. We're going to tear this apart. We're going to look at what's changed internally when we do the full review. We're also going to do any and all testing that people can suggest. And that includes measuring temperatures with the thermocouple. That includes, obviously I just proved non-contact voltage works and works quite well. It picked up even the 5 volts DC my camera is using. So we'll test that. We'll test ohms. We'll get some known value resistors and whatnot and do that. And we'll probably, once we establish all that, go through and cover. We've got a couple of other meters in our backlog that still need verified. Hey everyone, just a quick addition to the Harbor Frieght tools that we looked at. So I contacted Harbor Frieght and talked about the issues I had with this Warrior driver they sent me. They said that shouldn't have been representative of what's on a shelf. So they sent me this one. Also, this was supposed to have been in the package, but I guess there were none in the warehouse, so PR didn't know that I had it. This thing's fantastic for IT work, to the point where it's quite literally the new and improved model of the existing Pittsburgh one that I have. Now, I said IT work, which you're probably sitting there wondering what you use a wire stripper for. Well, for me, the fact that these are self-adjusting means that they rip the jackets off that last inch and a half of Ethernet cable when you're punching them down or putting crimp connects on them. No problem at all. Usually I don't have to do a whole ton of DC wiring, but it does happen from time to time. I've had to, rewire server fans because I couldn't get the exact model that fit on older units. Not a whole ton of AC stuff. I've had to repair some UPS units, put new crimp connectors on for some of the batteries on cheaper units that don't use the quick disconnects that are nice. But so I use the crap out of these. I've used this exact model for 10 years, but they do wear out, and this is probably my third replacement because Harbor Frieght does warranty these hand tools for life. So this is the Quinn, which is a beefed up version of that. Same thing, lifetime warranty on the hand tools. Insulated, non-insulated, 10 to 22 wire gauge, 7 to 8 millimeter ignition terminals, strip and cut wire from 10 to 24. These things, the molding feels 10 times better. Let's get them out of the package. The molding feels 10 times better. The blades look much better construction-wise. So my first one of these that failed, these are sintered blades that are then pressed into the unit. You can see that there's a dramatic change where the blade goes from the black aluminum that the body's made out of to the silver steel of the blade. Well, they appear to have used a magnesium material. Well, maybe it's steel, it's magnetic. So they've used a composite material here that's not aluminum to hold the blade. They do have replaceable blocks on the bottom where there's just 2 Phillips screws in here when this whole block should come out, which is an improvement on the entirely unreplaceable nature of these, although you're only replacing half of the blade, which is interesting. But yeah, so this much better looking design. These handles feel so much nicer. Very satisfying return when they click back. These are a little bit worn, but you can hear there's a dramatic difference there. And what is this? There's a wire stripper. There's a little plastic screw here that just isn't on the other one. I wonder what that is. So there's the swivel knob for micro adjustment, which is fine. They're calling this grip material TPR, which I've not actually seen before. Maybe that just means thermoplastic resin or something of that nature. You know what? This has got little marks on it. I bet this is for you to measure the length of wire before you put it into the stripper, which is interesting. Yeah, oh yeah, because I can see quarter, half. So that's probably 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so you can measure what you're doing. Oh, does that... It slides. Okay, that's not even mentioned on the product pick. Control the length of the core strip with the built-in adjustable stopper. Yes, it is. I just didn't read it. Okay, so you have this adjustable stopper, which actually, that's fantastic. That's a neat little addition that you can move, and then when you strip the wire, you're going to get that much stripped. Okay, that's neat. Does this fold down when you're not using it? No. No, it's not designed for that. You just slide it all the way in when you're not using it. Okay, that's neat. So yeah, these are the Quinn Wire strippers. These are a replacement for the old, I think these were Pittsburgh branded ones. Lots of improvements here. This is another actually improvement. So they've got this black plastic on the back here that you can see is protecting the mechanisms on the back. One thing that actually ended the life of one of my first ones was I was in a ceiling, there was a lot of stuff up there, And as I was stripping wires, something got jammed up underneath this plate, and it came loose, and well, that was the end of it. A couple of pieces fell out in the ceiling. I never found them. Wouldn't have been irreparable had I been able to do that, but having this on here helps keep things out of the mechanism. Good to see. Okay, and now here's the real star of this update. I mean, those are fantastic, but these are the Warrior screwdriver that I was not a huge fan of. You know what? How did I open those? Oh, I remember what I did now. All right. So same instruction book, we just looked at that. And the real question here is going to be, did they include the same batteries? Yes, they did. Thunderbolt alkalines. And is this as stubborn? There we go. So, just for comparison, this was the one that we got. And you can hear how it got stuck. And this is the new one. And it's not sticking, and the buttons actually feel better. Also, there's a grinding noise inside the first unit that is not present in the second one. Let's put that closer to a mic, make sure it's audible. Okay, so with that all said, you know, since I've got two of them and the manual shows me how to do it, let's use the new one to take apart the one that kept getting stuck. And maybe these pieces in the package are, no, those are still a pain to get out. That's just the nature of this style packaging. So that's a number 0 Phillips. All right. And yeah, I'm going to have to double check it with the meter. Because that was the one that caused me problems. But it feels like there's more torque behind this one as well. All right. So those 4 screws just kind of come out like that. At which point the body is 2 pieces and should, if I read this manual correctly, just kind of pop apart with a little bit of gentle prying here. Yep, there we go. The second something slid in, it just separates, and we've got a pretty basic design, and there's a couple of things in here that I like, and then there's a couple that I don't. I like only having one printed circuit board. That keeps costs down, that makes this very simple. The solder on this board, I'm not going to say is the cleanest that I've ever seen, but is entirely appropriate for the like $19.99 price tag of this tool. And that was going to be part of what I didn't like. So the entire mechanism for this, all of the gears, this is not a planetary gear. Well, yeah, it's not a planetary gearbox. This is just a standard gearbox. And everything's open and exposed. So the entire device here was just open, just wide open. So that went like that. And the second it wasn't held in, all of these little pins just fell out. Let's see if I can get these back in. Okay, so this is actually not bad engineering. I would have preferred things be a little more closed. And let's grab something with a finer point on it. I've got a little mechanical pencil here. So there's decisions in here that I like, and then there's a couple that I don't. Number one is I don't see any form of lubricant. Everything is just metal to metal contacts. So you've got a set of roller bearings here that are responsible for the rotation. So those two pieces interlock. And then this whole thing's just held in by the plastic body. So if you twist too much and it starts to slip, you have managed to disengage these two pieces. So this whole thing's just on these roller pins, and there's no lube in there. In fact, it's not inherently bad. So, yeah, the whole thing's on these rollers. There's no grease. There's no like powdered graphite lubricant, nothing of that nature. Something like that would probably be beneficial. And the gearbox is open. And it wouldn't take much to seal this. Just a little, white thermoplastic housing is all this really needs, because what the failure mode for a tool like this is going to be one of two things. You're going to over torque it, which you're actually going to have to do by hand, because one of the you're going to over torque it, which you'd have to do by hand, because the electronic components here do have the ability to say, hey, that's too much current, and stop the motor. It's not going to tear itself apart from the inside. Or you're going to get something in there, which it's sealed up fairly well on the plastic body, but there is still a couple of millimeters, or I shouldn't say a couple of millimeters, there's still like the width of a fingernail at the entry point there. And that is going to potentially lead to the gearbox, or this section with these pins in it, becoming full of just crap. So somebody gets full of crap, and there we go, that's how those interlock. It's going to fail, because there's just going to be a bunch of, garbage in it. And I wish these had a little bit more retention in there. I guess it's not really meant to be disassembled. It is good that I can disassemble it, because that means that, if I wanted to put some lithium grease or something of that nature in here just to help protect everything, I could, but yeah, so that's what's inside this little Warrior screwdriver. We've got a little gearbox that has got quite the reduction path on it. So we've got an itty bitty, looks to be like 6 or 8 tooth coming out of the motor, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different reducing gears before we get to our final drive. And like I said, it's not planetary, which does tend to be a more conventional design for a drill or an inline box like this. It's actually surprising to me to see that they went through the effort of, instead of doing a planetary assembly where they could have just done everything in line, they've done this, which takes 1, 2, 3 steps out of the path of motion and then bounces back in, which is weird. It's not bad. It's just not how I would have done it, and maybe there's a reason for that. I do like the use of brass. Brass is a very soft metal and tends to be a good bearing metal. So although I don't like that there's no grease in here, everything should self-lubricate on the metal to metal. And let's see if we can put this back together. So this goes here. And then we've got 6 of these, which is probably going to be the hard part, because those tip in like that. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan that those gears are exposed. If these wires aren't quite in the right spot either, they have the potential to get abraded by that gearbox, which, granted, shouldn't happen out of the factory and is mostly a me concern right now. So let's look at the molding on this. I don't see any obvious molding issues on the button. Pretty simple design. It's just a plastic button with a rubber insert. So I wonder, aha, there's a burr right there. And there's probably a couple of burrs on the molding. For the body, no, I don't see any here. Maybe removing that burr and just reseating everything will fix our sticking issue. So then this should just well, for the most part, wires for the LED aren't being completely cooperative. Not bad though. Much more torque out of the second one. Not 100% sure what would cause that. Yeah, I'm going to have to take this apart. Those wires are not in a good spot. That's clever. So the negative terminal of the battery is connected to the board by this spring. I didn't notice that at first. So you've got what looks like a piece of copper or brass that runs the full length of the body, connects to a spring insert on the cap, which is fairly normal. But then to make sure that it lines up in the body, they use a spring coming off the PCB that pushes against that pad. Interesting. So we can hear that motor is working harder, and I wonder if maybe I've got one of those roller bearings in the wrong spot. So I'll have to open this up again and take a look at it. But there we have it. Let's cut back to the main video now. If anyone has any questions or wants something specific tested, let me know in the comments below so we can make sure that we cover it. Other than that, I do want to thank anyone who helps support Pocketables either on Patreon or through our Amazon affiliate links. It is support like that that helps make some of the equipment that we need for testing things like this feasible. I also want to thank Electrix for providing our opening and closing themes. And finally, thank you for watching.